Hey guys, Dan here with Battlefield Curator. There's a lot of collectors out there that are looking for some pro tips. And I've got some pro tips for you savvy collectors out there. How do you become a savvy collector? Well, these are the top 5 things that I've been able to come up with that really set you apart from other collectors or enthusiasts. And if you really take into consideration these tips, they may prevent you from getting ripped off. Yeah, because that feeling of getting ripped off really sucks. All right, so what is a collectible? In layman's term, it's an item or object or something that can be obtained, and it can store value. It could go up in value. It's sought after by people. And what are some of those things that we really don't take into consideration that you should be taking into consideration? We're talking about supply and demand cycles. All right, so let's break that down just a little bit more. The supply is the availability of the collectible on the marketplace. The demand is how enthusiastic people are about it and how much they really want it. And the cycle is, hey, sometimes there could be a low supply and a high demand, which means that you're going to have super inflated prices. And then sometimes you might have a high supply and a low demand where you're going to have really low prices. But what's the best time to buy some of these collectibles? If you're looking at supply and demand cycles, let's take for an example, the pandemic. There was a huge demand for anything military surplus firearm. There was a lot of money flowing around. There's all kinds of demand out there. People were just scooping up stuff, buying stuff, which raised the prices, which people were now asking for a lot more for some of these collectibles. That is the time period you probably don't want to buy a lot, and you probably want to be really selective and look for good values. Now, what's an example of a low demand environment? Well, let's just say that there is a recession and money is tight and people are just liquidating stuff so they can survive. Those are the times that if you're sitting on cash, you can take advantage of that demand cycle, that very low demand cycle. And you might even have a higher supply of some of these collectibles on the marketplace because of the low demand and people liquidating their collections. All right, so what else sets you apart from just the average enthusiast? Well, you have to do research. Research. And when I see it all the time where people just don't do the research, they go into a place, they see something, and they just buy it because, hey, emotions and, hey, it looks cool, but they don't know anything about it. They don't know the history behind it. They don't know that, hey, maybe the ammo is a little hard to get. Maybe the ammo for this Carcano is, expensive, and they didn't take that into consideration. They didn't know it takes clips. So they saw, hey, look, a Carcano for really cheap, and they didn't do the proper research on the actual mechanical functions of it, and they didn't realize what kind of ammo it took, so they just bought it, which you got to do your research, guys. Another example of not doing proper research, let's say you do your research on, let's say, a Mosin 9130. You go into a shop, you see a Mosin 9130, you know about the history behind it, you go ahead and you purchase it for $1,000. Okay, well, you did your research on the history of it, but you didn't do your research on the value of it. What's the going rate for it, right? What are some comparables? Can you find it online for cheaper? The fair value of Mosin was, say, $400 at the time, and you paid $1,000 for it. You just got ripped off. That's not to say that eventually maybe a Mosin might come back up to $1,000 over a period of sometime within the next 50 years. I would guess that maybe Mosins might become $1,000 rifle again, but you just got ripped off in the short term, in the medium term, because now if you wanted to say you had a hardship and you had to get rid of it, you couldn't get rid of it for what you put into it, and you only enjoy it for so short of time frame. When you realize there's a lot better rifles out there for $1,000 than a Mosin M9130. So yeah, just make sure to do your proper research. All right, so next here is emotions versus logic. Yes, sometimes you might get emotionally attached to a certain rifle or a certain collectible, a certain antique, an antique firearm, something. You say, gotta have it, I gotta have it, I gotta have it. Well, you see something in a store, you did your research, you don't like the price too much, but you're like, hey, you know what? I just really want it. You got to take a step back and think logically. Maybe instead of just purchasing it right up front, maybe try to negotiate. Say, okay, well, I really want it. It's a little higher than what I wanted to buy it for. I've done my research on it. Maybe I can negotiate. So take a few days, maybe. I find it best to take about 2 or 3 days and think about it. Another way to think about something logically is, oh, that collectible is super cheap. You know what? I've done my research. I know about it. I know what the value is. It's really cheap. It's not going to stick around very long. So, what's the logical decision there? You're going to say, hey, logic says I should probably scoop this up before somebody else in the area does. So that would be another logical decision if you really wanted it. Another emotion based example here that you shouldn't probably do is you might see something and you'll say, ooh, that's a fair value. Ooh, I really want it. I've done my research. I know what the value is, but I don't have the money right now. So what do? You put it on your credit card knowing that you won't be able to pay it off at the end of the month, and you'll end up spending a lot more money with those interest rate charges. So buying that collectible and paying all that interest is not a logical decision. That's an emotional decision because you really wanted it. So next time, take a step back, take a day or two, and think about it logically before you just buy it. All right, now let's talk about how not to get ripped off. You might be at a shop and you might see a rifle, you've done your research, you've done really good stuff, but it's got a carving on the stock. Some backyard bubba put a little carving in there. Even though the rifle's at fair value, you know that carving is going to devalue that rifle. Let's say you see a rifle and it's got some mechanical issues. At fair value, it's not really worth that much because you got to go buy the parts and everything. Let's say you come across a sporterized rifle. Now you've got to buy a whole bunch of parts to put into it to get it to working condition, the original military configuration. Don't get ripped off buying sporter rifles. Unless you really, really have a passion for restoring sporterized rifles back to their original military configuration, that's on you. Beware of shady tactics used by shops, and definitely watch out for fancy wording on online descriptions and on the price tags, or maybe even the sellers at the shop owners giving you some fancy wording. When you're talking to them, they might go, well, this is not going to last long, or I could sell this on Gunbroker for $2,000. Okay, dude, well, if you could sell on Gunbroker, why don't you? You have it in the shop for $2,000, but you probably only got about 50 eyeballs looking at it within a month. Where if you went put it on Gunbroker, you'd have hundreds of eyeballs looking at it. Because the shop owner is just trying to make a little claim to get you to buy it. Because you don't really want to put it online. He's being a little lazy there. And so he's just trying to get you to buy it for that amount because that's what he thinks it's going to go for. The reality is probably not going to get that much for it. And he doesn't want to take the time to take the pictures to make a listing to then have to pay all the fees to list it on Gunbroker or whatever auction site. Also look out for the price tags at the shops where they might put rare on the price tag, or they might put collectible. They might use some fancy words in the price tags. Online descriptions, they might use fancy words. They might use social media marketing tactics. They might use email marketing tactics to really get you in there and to scoop you up and to get you to buy one or two or three or whatever of those rifles. You should be always looking out for those fancy words to avoid getting ripped off. All right, and the last thing here I'm going to go over is insurance, security, and a will. All right, so you could talk to your homeowner's insurance, and you can set up an insurance that way for your collectibles, your rifles, whatever else you got, gold, silver, bullion. Just give them a number, like, hey, it's worth this much. So in case something happens, you have an insurance coverage policy that'll cover it. Also, look at security, right? It's actually said that more houses in lower income areas get broken into than houses in higher income areas. That's a statistic I remember reading. I don't remember the exact numbers, but that's what I read. Why is that? Maybe because the houses in the more wealthier areas have better security. So definitely set up your security so that you can prevent people from taking your stuff. So I'm talking about safes, talking about locks, and I'm talking about chains. Get those things secured, right? Look at actual security system with sensors and cameras and hidden hidden cameras around the house, so that way if somebody does break in, and tries to steal your stuff, you can definitely ID them for the police. You could also have a personal defense weapon as a part of your security plan, but definitely have a plan in place. Definitely have security, and then let's go to the will. You never know when you're going to pass away. In your will, you could put in there like, hey, these go to this person, these go to this person. Maybe your brother really likes collectibles and he knows how to take care of them, and he could be a steward of those collectibles. Also, be sure to make arrangements with one of your family members or your spouse or somebody so when if you do pass away, they know what to do with your surplus collectibles. Um, they know where to take it to, what shop to take it to. There's a plan in place, to go to this auction place, because at the end of the day, what are they probably going to do with the collectibles? They're probably either going to keep them, or they might try to go to the nearest pawn shop and get the bottom dollar for them. So you don't want to set them up for failure. You want them to have some knowledge, and you want them to definitely take it to a reputable place. I've heard a story where, and this probably happens a lot, where a very young couple, that one of their parents passed away. Well, the parents had a lot of silver coins, like silver collectible coins from like the 60s and the 50s. Well, and even the 40s. What did they do? They just went to a bank and turned it into the bank. And the bank just gave him what the face value was for those coins. Now, those coins, let's say a dime is 10 cents face value. A silver dime from the 50s is probably worth $1, right? So, yeah, they definitely got ripped off there. So definitely have those plans in place so your family members don't get ripped off. And this is the kind of content I like making, guys. I'm just trying to inform you. If you like it, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Share this content with your compadres. And as always, be sure to learn history and curate history. Make it a great day.